fact, the U.S. style of what's called neocolonialism, develop paramilitary or military forces, collaborationist forces to control the population and make sure they don't do outrageous things like express sympathy when some other part of the population is being slaughtered. That's very encouraging, and we're good at it. It's second nature. Now, General Dayton's forces are the soft side of population control. There are also much tougher and more brutal forces in the West Bank. They're called General Intelligence and Preventive Security. And those guys are really tough, not like Dayton. They're trained by the CIA. There's no supervision for CIA training, so they can really train, mass killers. General Dayton is technically under State Department supervision, and that means Congress occasionally has a look at it, and maybe some soft-hearted congressman say something about human rights conditionalities. But CIA-trained forces can just be unconstrained in brutality and torture and terror. So that's the tough part of the encouraging developments, which finally give Israel a legitimate partner for peace for the first time. Well, let's go back to the reconceptualization, the core of the Obama policies. Israel-Palestine is now sidelined, with the exception of supporting the encouraging development of paramilitary forces to control the population and keep them quiet. And we now have to move towards a coalition of Israel, the Arab moderates, who are now, the Arab moderates now willing to cooperate with Israel against Iran. Oh, what's U.S. policy towards Iran? Obama and Kerry agree that the U.S. must maintain the threat of force against Iran. So that's what it means to say all options are open. Threat of force is, first of all, in violation of international law. Take a look at the UN Charter. It says the threat or use of force is barred. It's criminal. But the U.S. has no particular interest in international law. It's also against the will of a large majority of the American population. A large majority of the population thinks we ought to enter into normal relations with Iran. No threat of force. But the population is as irrelevant as international and domestic law are. So they agree on that. And they agree on a lot more. The Obama administration is willing to negotiate with Iran, but on a condition, namely the condition that U.S. demands, namely the ending of uranium enrichment, are conceded in advance. So if Iran agrees to our conditions, we'll then negotiate with them, but not before. That was put most clearly by Vice President Biden, who spelled out the administration's position. He said that the U.S. was willing to negotiate if Iran first puts a stop to its illicit weapons programs. Well, what are Iran's illicit weapons programs? There was a national intelligence estimate a year ago, over a year ago, which concluded with moderate to high confidence that Iran had no weapons programs and hadn't had any for years. But that doesn't matter. The Obama administration, when it came into office, said, we reject the intelligence estimate. They conceded that they had no evidence, but we don't like it, so we reject it. So therefore, they have illicit weapons programs, and until they stop the programs, which they may or may not have, U.S. intelligence says they didn't have them, we can't enter into negotiations. We also read constantly that the international community has demanded that Iran stop uranium enrichment. First of all, everyone agrees that uranium enrichment is a right of Iran. They signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They have the right of uranium enrichment. That's unlike Israel, say, which didn't sign it, doesn't have that right, but has a couple hundred nuclear weapons. So who's the international community? Well, the international community consists of Washington, U.S. allies who agree with Washington, and nobody else. It omits most of the world, the non-aligned states, most of the world states, forcefully support Iran's right to develop, to enrich uranium for nuclear power. So they're not part of the international community. A large majority of Americans agree with them. About 75% agree, yes, Iran has the right to enrich uranium. So they're not part of the international community. The international community is reduced to Washington and whoever goes along with it. Okay, so in that sense, it's true the international community is opposed to demands that Iran stop its enrichment of uranium. And just to add a little bit to the irony, the programs that Iran is carrying out were strongly supported by the United States, by Kissinger, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, as long as the Shah was in power. The U.S. had installed a brutal tyrant, overthrew Iranian democracy. They somehow remember that, but we're not supposed to. And during that period, the U.S. Insisted strongly and helped Iran develop a nuclear enrichment, uranium enrichment programs. In fact, a lot of it was done at MIT, where I was, because of that. And, the Shah sent thousands of nuclear engineers to be trained at MIT to develop nuclear enrichment programs. Well, that was then. Then the country was ruled by the tyrant we imposed. Now, not. So I don't need nuclear energy. There is no attention at all paid to the most important proposal, which a large majority of Americans agreed to. That is to establish a nuclear weapons-free zone in the region, which is the right idea. That would include Iran, Israel, any American forces deployed there with a verification system. Okay, that would mitigate, if not eliminate, any potential threat that Iran poses, but that's off the agenda because it would mean that Israel has to get rid of its illegal and huge collection of nuclear weapons, and of course the U.S. forces wouldn't be able to have nuclear weapons there. The U.S. has also blocked nuclear weapons-free zones in other parts of the world because it wants to deploy nuclear armed forces there, South Pacific, Europe, Israel. But this one is off the agenda, though a large majority, about 75% of Americans favor it. Obama did give a speech, which you read about, to Iran, reaching out in friendship on the Iranian New Year. There's a lot of publicity for that. What did he actually say? He said, yes, we're delighted to deal with you. It's a big radical change from the Bush administration. But first you have to show that you're responsible members of the civilized world. You have to give up arms and terror. Okay.